All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It actually is afternoon now, so that's nice. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to another video. And we've got a lot of news to talk about because apparently, right after I uploaded, everything decided to happen. So, what do I mean by that? Well, let's start off by saying Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer decided that now is the time to retire. And he said he'll retire at the end of the term and when these two things have been met, at the end of the term and when his replacement is confirmed. So, yeah. And this is going to be an interesting confirmation fight. And it's going to be that way for a few things. First, Biden has pretty much promised that he is going to uphold his campaign promise of nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court. Now, of course, this is kind of hilarious because some insider information, I want to say it was an article. I forget where the article was. It was from an actual major news site. And they talked about how George W. Bush wanted to nominate someone to the D.C. Circuit. Forget who she was. I forget her name, basically. But Bush did it just because he felt this lady was a qualified jurist. And Joe Biden led a Democratic filibuster of her nomination. Some circles were pretty much saying that they didn't want the Republicans to be able to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court, which is ridiculous. But entirely possible, if we're being completely honest. And of course, everybody remembers that Biden also filibustered, not filibustered, but he really attacked Clarence Thomas hard when Thomas was appointed to the Supreme Court. So, yeah. Now, there's going to be a lot of Republicans who are going to attack whoever Biden nominates for lacking qualifications. And I think that's a little unfair. Doesn't really matter whether it's fair or not, but it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be good because a lot of the options Biden has are very qualified. District Court judge from South Carolina, for example, or one of the judges on the D.C. Circuit. A California State Supreme Court justice. One that hasn't been mentioned is the candidate, pretty much who's going to wind up being Democrats' candidate for Senate in North Carolina, who was the state's chief justice of their Supreme Court. So, yeah. There's definitely qualified candidates that fit Biden's criteria. So the other option that Democrats are going to have is they're going to say, well, it's purely racist. But are you telling me that Republicans are going to vote differently on a Biden appointee solely because of their race? I don't think so. Pretty much every Republican is going to be guaranteed to vote against whoever Biden nominates. There may be an exception if Biden nominates the judge from South Carolina. You'll probably get Lindsey Graham voting in favor, which Lindsey Graham is more deferential anyway on judicial picks, judicial appointees, kind of like Joe Manchin. Um, Also, probably get Tim Scott, state pride and all that stuff. But it's going to put a lot of people on record who are up for re-election this year. Two of whom had won special elections in 2020 in order to, be elected to their seats. Mark Kelly in Arizona and Raphael Warnock in Georgia. And right now, Warnock is not doing fantastically against his most likely opponent in the general election, Herschel Walker. I'm biased, obviously, but yeah. So if he votes for votes to confirm too liberal of a pick, I can see the Georgia Republican Party just continuously hammering that point home. Because Georgia is still a state that, relative to the nation, leans towards the Republicans in an environment, a national environment that is probably still going to favor the GOP. It's not a good idea. And the same thing can be said in Arizona. The only difference is Arizona's Republican Party is self-immolating. And I know I've used that term a lot, but it's true. The Arizona Republican Party has no clue what they're doing. They're eating themselves alive. And to be fair, it looks like the state Democratic Party is maybe doing the same thing with regards to a certain senator, Kyrsten Sinema. Nevada's Democratic Party, Nevada's just its own little interesting world. But Cortez Masto, yeah, she absolutely is going to have to put herself on record here. And that's going to give, that's ammunition for whoever her eventual challenger is going to be. New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan dodged one bullet, and that Chris Sununu decided not to run. Well, she now has to, in one of the swingiest states in the nation, decide whether or not to vote for a nominee who may be too far left for the state. Now, that said, there's for sure one swing state Republican who's going to have to make some political calculus as well, potentially two more. In Wisconsin, Ron Johnson has decided to run for a third term, and let's be frank here, Wisconsin is definitely a swing state, but it's very evenly balanced. Obviously, it could still hurt him, but he has a lot of wind in his sails from being an incumbent in a year favoring his party in a state that has been getting redder, more and more Republican. So he's got three significant factors, but that doesn't mean it's unwinnable for the Democrats. So it is absolutely possible that Ron Johnson, who is almost certainly going to vote against confirmation, is going to have that used against him, and it may work. It absolutely might work. Because it's going to be used by the Wisconsin Democrats to say, look at Ron Johnson. He wouldn't vote to confirm Biden's nominee for the Supreme Court. It means he's racist and he's sexist. It doesn't, but, and that is an unfair attack, but again, it doesn't matter. People need to get it out of their heads that attack ads need to be fair. They don't. And that's probably why there's a lot of political apathy in the United States. Go to Iowa, where Chuck Grassley is running for his millionth term. I think he's been in the Senate since probably since the Van Buren administration. I know he's old, but I don't know exactly how old. He's been in there for a long, long time. And he probably should retire, but... And honestly, I don't think that seat's going to be competitive regardless of what Grassley does. He's going to vote against, and I don't see that moving the polls one way or another. Florida... Yeah, Marco Rubio is way too strong in the Sunshine State. Not going to change things all that much. So that's why swing state. That's basically why the Democrats are in a much more difficult situation, because they've got more swing state Democrats. They've got more swing state votes up this year than the Republicans do, and that might affect their votes. Sorry about that. As for how this confirmation hearing is going to affect the midterms, my personal opinion is probably it'll increase turnout a little bit, particularly among Republicans. But Democrats could also be motivated. They really could. But I don't think there's going to be a super significant effect either way regarding this vacancy and the confirmation hearings to follow, because it's not going to change the balance of the court. It's just going from one liberal to another, one who's probably going to be a little bit less inclined to seek compromise with the conservative wing of the court, and one who's probably a little bit more progressive ideologically, much more in line with what, say, a Sanders would want. But, hey. But I could absolutely see it benefiting either party. Republicans could be much more energized about this and say, we need to make sure that we dominate the Senate. And, of course, to make sure that Biden doesn't have the opportunity to force through a bunch of more nominees if things go, if sudden death or illness occurs on the court. Could energize Democrats to say, hey, look at what's at stake. For example, if the hearings go past November, or go into November, could motivate Democrats. Could. But I think the most sober, most cold take that could be made is turnout's probably going to increase a little bit. That's about it. Also, we need to remember that the outcome of the midterms doesn't have as much bearing on the following general election as some people think. For example, Ohio, that voted for a Democratic senator in 2018, Sherrod Brown, and in 2020, it voted for Donald Trump by about 8%. Montana, John Tester survived his re-election campaign, surprisingly, by about 3%, and Donald Trump won it by about 15%. Actually, it's probably closer to 18%. Trying to think of some other examples. Trying to think of examples the other way. Or let's use gubernatorial elections. Gubernatorial elections are even worse to use than Senate elections. For example, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maryland all elected Republican governors. Well, technically re-elected Republican governors. And guess what? All three went to the Democrats by very large margins in 2020. Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana, all three have Democrats as governors, and actually no, Mississippi might have a Republican, but I know Kentucky and Louisiana have Democrats. And are either of them even remotely competitive in presidential elections? If you answered no, you'd be correct. So it's that case of don't take the midterms too, seriously. Don't read too much into the midterms. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see y'all next time. Likes, comments, and subscriptions, they always do help, and I greatly appreciate them. Have a nice day.